I'd like to welcome all of you to the studio today for Between the Covers, and that is the new name of the WXEL Book Club, and it is sponsored by WXEL and Murder on the Beach Mystery Bookstore in Delray Beach. And I want to welcome our author who is here today from New York. By the way, anything's better than New York today, right?
That's true.
So you wouldn't care where we were.
That's true. Well, I wish we were outside.
This is Alex Berenson, and Alex began his journalism career at the Denver Post. He was one of the first employees of TheStreet.com, and that's the groundbreaking financial news website. Then he went to something you might have heard of called the New York Times. In 1999, I believe you started there. He covered all kinds of stories, from the drug industry to Hurricane Katrina. He served as a correspondent in Iraq, which, interesting. That experience led to his winning the Edgar Award with his debut novel, The Faithful Spy. He left the New York Times as a journalist. He returned to the New York Times on the #1 bestseller list, so not too bad, as a novelist. His latest novel, which is right here in front of me, is in the John Wells series. It's The Counterfeit Agent. It is my pleasure to welcome Alex Berenson to WXEL. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So, reporting, you miss it at all?
There are things I miss about it. I miss it less than I thought I did. When I left the Times in 2010, I thought I was going to do more work, and I actually, for a while, I still had my desk there, and I still had my computer, and I lost my email, then I lost my computer, then I lost my desk, and then I really wasn't connected to the paper anymore. Writing a book a year doesn't give me that much time to be a reporter. I do try to write 1 or 2 pieces of nonfiction a year.
Alex, I'm going to ask you just to speak up just
Sure.
a little more,
Sure.
so we can, I can see some people may not be able to hear you. I would think it would be a lot more fun to make things up than to tell the truth. So there is that element.
Yeah, I mean, I do enjoy getting to control my characters and be inside their heads and make sure that, they're doing what I want them to do. One of the frustrations of being a reporter is that you never, or not never, but oftentimes you have the feeling people are not telling you the whole story. And as I like to say about my books, my characters, they can lie to each other and they can even lie to themselves, but they can't lie to me.
Was it scary for you to leave, as my father would call, the job where you get paid every week?
Yes, it was. The Times, much less so now, but even when I started, it was sort of once you got hired, you essentially could stay for your whole career. It was sort of it was not a place that many journalists left, and that's changed a lot in the last few years. I think I actually left at a time when its prospects looked the bleakest, and I think it's done a lot better in the last couple of years. It's sort of made the transition to being this powerful internet site as well as a very good newspaper. But when I left, although I knew that I was taking a chance, I also knew that the paper wasn't as stable as it always had been.
You left a very, I'll call it a vibrant career where there are people coming in and out of your day all the time, 24 hours a day, to really a solitary existence. Writing can be lonely.
Yes, very lonely.
Was that a challenge for you?
That's a challenge. I need to make sure, I try to make sure I get out of the house once a day at least, because it is easy to sort of have the day go by and realize I haven't talked to anybody but the dog. Less so now. We now have an 18-month-old, and so she's in the house, and there's somebody taking care of her. So I'm not going to be alone all the time. But that certainly was true, and it's still, I still don't have as much interaction as I probably should.
You are a great researcher, and for anyone who's read any of your books, that's so obvious. Your background as a reporter, I assume, helped you out on
very
this.
much, very much.
Can you talk about how much time you need to spend on a book to get the research right?
I I spend as much time as I need.
Do you spend as much time researching as you do writing?
In some ways, I mean, I might spend more, but that isn't necessarily a good thing. I've been talking a lot lately about the internet and how the internet affects me as a writer. And one of the things it does is it makes research very easy on one level, but it also makes it very easy to waste time researching and sort of over-researching.
We all know that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just everybody does it. And so at some point, I have to kind of stop researching and stop reading, whether it's the Rand Corporation reports or obscure newspapers or message boards about X, Y, and Z, and just get to writing. I also talk to whoever I can for these books. There are some people, not necessarily within the United States government, but some within the government, some who are former government officials, and then just other people who will talk to me. So both internet research and real in-person research.
We're talking about a spy novel, essentially. People are talking to you?
Some people. It's more, it's funny. There are authors out there who will claim that they have really good sources inside the CIA, and that's basically a lie.
I would hope it is.
The agency does not make a habit of talking to reporters that much, or novelists. But there are people who I can talk to who might be sort of former, let's say they're former Army officers. And so I can ask a question about tactics or something like that. And it's not specific to, what did the United States do, here at this time. It's just in this tactical position, what would you do? And so that's the kind of question I can get answered.
When you're doing your research, you're among friends here, so you can spill it. Anything come up that really surprised you about the spy business?
It's what's surprising, I think, is how much the CIA has changed since 9/11. That it really was, I mean, for better and mainly for better, I think, somewhat for worse. It was this place in the 90s, especially, that was totally at sea, and they didn't have much of a mission, and there was a lot of drinking. Actually, there was a lot of sort of the old CIA, certainly, in the 80s and the 90s, especially, was a lot of guys going to cocktail parties and trying to recruit, a mid-level, let's say, Ministry of Defense official in whatever country you were in, and you could waste a lot of time doing that, and a lot of them did waste a lot of time doing that. And 9/11 woke people up and really forced them to take what they were doing a lot more seriously. But at the same time, it changed them into almost a paramilitary organization where a lot of the emphasis was on, who are we going to kill this month? What terrorists are there out there that we can target with drones? And the drone program was a big part of that. And so on the one hand, they've been very effective at, there has not been another major terrorist attack since 9/11. And when you start talking about the CIA since 9/11, you have to give them a lot of credit for that, whatever else you think about what they're doing. On the other hand, they've been less of an espionage agency, and I don't know how they're trying to return to that. Obama has definitely made, he's made an effort to say we need to go back to more espionage and less paramilitary, less, kinetic operations, as they like to say. The kinetics being the kinetics of the, bullet or missile that blows up. But how they get back, I don't know. And I think people don't really recognize that. The other thing that the realization that I had, and what people sort of told me, but this is now public, is just how much the NSA was doing and what their capabilities were. And that was a surprise to me, as it was a surprise, I think, to a lot of people last year when the disclosures came out.
Speaking of the NSA, this is so timely. I mean, we've got Snowden in the book.
Yes. I try to make the books feel very real, and so that includes referencing real people, real events. one of the things about the Counterfeit Agent is it's about an effort to trick the United States into a war with Iran. And I don't want to say who the bad guys are because that does not come out until late in the book, but they spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to avoid being caught by essentially by the NSA, really more than the CIA. They're more worried about communications intercepts than anything else. And I mean, there's no question we have by far the most robust electronic spying in the world.
Anybody who's read a chapter in one of your books knows that you know your history. I mean, we go back to, and you have it in context, you go back to the origins of the Taliban and, you know, up to present day. It's important for you to get it right.
Yes, yes. And if I don't get it right, I hear from readers. This book, actually, I've gotten fewer comments about mistakes, which is a good thing, because I know the book's selling pretty well, and so if I haven't heard back, it probably means there are fewer mistakes. One of the better mistakes I had of late was in The Night Ranger, which was the previous book. Several readers, and the first reader who pointed this out was Newt Gingrich, believe it or not.
That famous book reviewer, Newt Gingrich.
But Newt apparently knows all about hyenas. I don't know if I should be surprised by that or not. He's a fan of the books, and he emailed and said, you know, I like the book, but there's several scenes in The Night Ranger, because it takes place in East Africa and Somalia and Kenya, where John Wells, where the hero is, he's up against hyenas. There are these hyenas, and he winds up actually having to shoot several of them. And, you know, hyenas, contrary to their reputation, are not cowardly animals. They're very fierce. They're pack animals, and on occasion they will fight off lions. And I'd seen them in the wild and was, you know, sort of very impressed with them and wanted to have them in the book, and did a fair amount of research, and yet somehow managed to miss the fact that hyenas are not a patriarchal society. They're matriarchal. And it's not an alpha male, as I initially said in The Night Ranger. It's the alpha female. So Newt pointed that out, and several other readers pointed that out, and in the paperback, I corrected it. So, so the dirty little secret of the books is, if you want to make sure I've got everything right, you should wait for the paperback to come out.
There is a Newt Gingrich connection to our Palm Beach Zoo, by the way. So maybe
is he funding the hyena exhibit?
He and a previous director co-wrote a book together at one point about ecology and environmentalism, and so who knows?
I've never met him. Just based on our email interactions, he seems like a very smart guy, whatever else he is.
Speaking of guys, we have to look at John Wells, who is your main character. Describe him to us, if you would.
So John Wells is the hero of all 8 of my novels, and he is now a former CIA agent, because he quit. I won't say he quit in a huff, but he eventually got tired of being used and quit, and now he gets used in different ways. But he, at the beginning of The Faithful Spy, which is the first of my novels, which came out in 2006, he's being sent back to the United States by Al-Qaeda, and he's been inside Al-Qaeda for several years, as he was sent in by the CIA before 9/11, and 9/11 happened, and he failed to prevent it. And he essentially decided at that point that he was not going to leave Afghanistan and Pakistan until they believed in him enough to they know he's American, to use him in another terrorist attack, which he can then prevent. So that's who he is. He's a CIA operative who's been undercover for a very long time at the beginning of The Faithful Spy. And the CIA does not really trust him when he comes home. And by the way, if this sounds like Homeland to you, as it may, because he's also a convert to Islam, and that has also that impacts his relationship with the agency. They don't really trust him.
You did this before?
I did this before
Brody in Homeland.
That's correct. Wells existed before Brody, and the fact that Saul Berenson on Homeland is called Saul Berenson is not a coincidence. The guys who created Homeland. Actually, they ran 24 before they created Homeland, and they had me out to consult on 24. So they're they're fans of the books. And I try to look at this in a positive way as saying like, oh, you know, they paid a little bit of tribute to me rather than saying, you know what, they stole my idea. But that's the genesis. That's who John Wells is. He's this disaffected but ultimately loyal citizen of the United States, loyal American, who although he's a soldier as much as a spy, and on some level he has a soldier's attitude, which is these orders may stink and they may even be wrong, but my job is to carry them out. And so he winds up, even after he quits the agency, which he does about 4 books in, he winds up enmeshed with the agency and being used by the agency. And he is not, he knows he can't save the world. He knows he's going to be used, but all he can do is try to carry out missions that he thinks are generally going to help the world a little bit.
I still want to go back to converting to Islam,
Sure.
because everybody does.
Sure.
We have a lot of problems in this country with stereotypes.
Sure.
It was important to you for him to go this religious route?
No. That's. I didn't do it because I wanted to make a point or anything like that. I did it because I thought that John Wells would need something, because The Faithful Spy came out in 2006. So he, by my conception, had been over there for 6 or 7 years continuously without ever coming home, because he realizes that he can't break cover, he can't leave. And so he needed something to hold on to. And the only thing for him to hold on to was the religion. He's not going to, he's with a group of people who are Muslim and who are violently anti-American. He's not going to become violently anti-American. If he's going to bond with them in any way and not go crazy from loneliness, he has to take their religion and really believe in it. And he does believe in it. Wells is not strongly religious, and that would be true if he were Christian or if he were Jewish. He does believe in God, but he doesn't believe in, sort of he certainly doesn't believe in a just God after all he's seen. And so Islam for him is a religion, but it's also this thing to hold on to. And then it becomes something else as well, which is he becomes disaffected with the United States because he sees, the wealth and sort of the thoughtlessness sometimes of contemporary American culture, and he doesn't like it. And Islam is a way for him to stand apart from that. So, it's funny, I don't know if any of you have read the books, but I feel very fortunate that the books have done as well as they have, because I think Wells is actually not that easy a character, and as characters in contemporary spy fiction go, he's more complicated and I think more difficult to like. I think ultimately people like him because he has real integrity and because he is a really tough guy.
His girlfriends would agree with you.
Yes, his girlfriends keep leaving him.
Romantically challenged.
Romantically challenged, yes.
You mentioned 24 a few minutes ago, and you consulted on that. And when that first started, that was like the most clever TV show
Yes.
ever.
Yes.
It was great. Kiefer Sutherland was the agent. How was it working on that? What was that experience
it was
like?
very interesting for me because when I came on, it was the beginning of the final season. And so they had literally done everything. They had blown up a nuclear weapon, not once, but twice. I think they'd blown up all of LA. They'd had the super virus. They had everything. So they were sort of stuck creatively. And television, the way television is made is actually very interesting to see from the inside. And you had all these very smart, creative people and quite well paid. And they would sit in a room for hours batting around these ideas. And some of them were actually quite clever. And then they would just look, and somebody would say, oh, well, we did that, 3 years ago, or we did that in season 1. And ultimately, I think they sort of gave up creatively, and they went back to the basic, tropes of every year's story, which was Kiefer gets called in by a buddy who's in trouble. And that was sort of how season 8 started, and that's how all the seasons started. And I'll be very interested to know, and I've not been part of it, but they're coming back,
Right.
I believe in June this year, what they're going to do. And Howard Gordon, who's the creator of 24, is a very talented guy, and I don't think he would have agreed to do this. He does not need the money if he didn't think he had a really good idea. So I'd love to know what it is.
As they say, stay tuned.
Exactly.
The Iranian threat is front and center in the book, the nuclear thing. And, you know, you pick up a newspaper and that's what we're talking about, the sanctions and what are your thoughts? Are we to trust these people in what they say?
I don't trust them. I don't trust Iran at all. I mean, there's a long history of Iranian acrimony with the United States, and you know, by the way, it's not all their fault. You know, we behaved. You know, we supported a dictator there for 30 years, and they haven't forgotten it, even if we have. The other reason I don't believe them is having a nuclear weapon is such a powerful strategic defense that I'm not sure why, if they're very close to it, they would give it up or, you know, give up the chance at it, unless the regime is under such pressure economically that it's about to collapse. So just think about this. In the last 20 or 25 years, there's been 3 countries that have really made serious efforts to get nuclear weapons. One was Iraq, and you know, the Israelis bombed them and they couldn't get one. One was Libya, and they sort of gave up in 2003 when, you know, we were sort of at the peak of our power and we toppled Saddam, and they gave up. And the third was North Korea. So Gaddafi is dead. Saddam Hussein is dead, and the Kim family lives on in North Korea, and that is not a coincidence. Nuclear weapons are essentially a guarantee that you will never be invaded. And if I were the Iranians, I would want that guarantee, and I would do almost anything to get it. So why we think that they're negotiating, or why they've decided to give up, I don't know. If they really have, we're very fortunate. And that if the sanctions have really worked, we're very fortunate. By the way, this doesn't mean that I think we should bomb them or that we can necessarily stop them from getting nuclear weapons if they really want them. I just think you need to deal with the realities of what the strategic positions are, and we've tried very hard. The sanctions seem to be working. But if they've actually worked well enough to get the Iranians to the table, and if in a year or two we get to a point where they say, you know what, like, you can come in, you can inspect our plants, you can do everything, I'll just be shocked. I just don't see it happening. Yes.
Okay. You'll have to read the book to find out what happens. In the beginning of the book, here is John Wells on a Caribbean cruise, and I'm going, this can't possibly be. I mean, it's all just too nice. With his girlfriend, he's ready to propose. I think he has the ring with him. He's ready to propose, and then, of course, something happens, and you know, if you've read any of the other books, you're on your way to an adventure at that point. Yes. Now, if I was your wife, I would think the next adventure should be like Bora Bora.
Yes, I'm beginning to think that
because
too.
then you could do research there and take the family.
I mean, I've been to Lebanon, I've been to Saudi Arabia, I've been to Afghanistan for these books. I've been to Egypt. I was in Iraq for the paper, and John's got to go to like Paris. And,
I think so.
I'm sure you all know who Dan Silva is, and Silva has like 4 places his heroes go. You know, it's like Zurich, London, Rome. Occasionally he sends them to Moscow. But I got to get Wells on the European tour.
Although Istanbul is a fabulous place.
Yes, Istanbul is nice.
And your sense of place is as much a character in your books. You really nail it.
Yes, I try hard to do that. Because I feel like it's something people buy the books for, and not everybody's going to get to go to these places. They're expensive and they take time to get to, and if I can get you there and you're excited to go, then that's a good reason to buy the book.
You can, when you read it, we know you've been there. It's obvious. So if this doesn't work out, maybe travel writing could be next.
I think it's gotten really hard to make a living as a travel writer. I would love to try it. There's a guy named Stuart Stevens who actually ran the Romney campaign. But Stuart is a genuinely interesting and weird guy, and he wrote these great books about China. This was in the 80s when China was really close to Westerners, and Africa driving from from Nigeria up to the North African coast. If you ever have a chance, look up Stuart Stevens for some good travel writing.
Stuart Stevens. We looked at briefly Snowden, the NSA, the nuclear threat. There's one thing, and I wondered how much is based in reality, and you've pretty much answered that this is pretty real stuff, which is scarier than if you made it up. But there's parts in the book where they are throwing around money, like $100,000 for information or misinformation or a hint of,
Sure.
of a name of someone.
Sure.
Does that happen?
Well, we have a $700 billion defense budget and another 60 or 70 billion on intelligence. 100,000, what's that between friends?
Wow. That, to me, that was scary.
I mean, there are literally duffel bags, and this has been reported. Duffel bags of cash get dropped off at Hamid Karzai's office. We've been trying money that may or may not have been well spent, but we spend a lot of money.
Speaking of bags of money being dropped off, am I correct that you covered the Bernie Madoff scandal?
I was not the main reporter on it. That was a woman named Diana Henriquez for the paper, who wrote a very good book about Madoff. But yes, I did write. I was the second reporter.
He left a trail of destruction in this neighborhood.
Yes, I remember coming down to Palm Beach. I guess 5 years ago now, almost. No, actually, yes, 5 years ago.
Did you understand him at all from writing about him?
I didn't see. I wasn't talking to the family, so I didn't know. I know that the big question that that everybody had in 2009 was, did Ruth Madoff know? And Diana, who I think was as close to the story as anybody and did a lot of work and talked to whoever she could find, ultimately decided or believed that Ruth did not know. The other big question was, and this I was closer to, was when did it start? And I found some documents and actually wrote a story back, this was probably the most interesting story I wrote, showing that the SEC in about 1990, so that was almost 20 years before, had come across these two guys named Avellino and Barnes, and they had run a Ponzi that seemed to be related to Bernie's fund, or was related to Bernie's fund. So that suggested to me that he had been playing this game for at least 20 years. I don't think actually we've ever found out how far back it went, but those were the two big questions. And it's amazing to me that Ruth could have not known, but I think it's also a question of era and time. And, I think she married when she was very young, and it's possible she didn't know.
Did you get a sense of the man?
I didn't. I mean, aside from the fact that there's something very intimate about that kind of crime, because you're looking your victims in the eye, you're stealing from them, as you're playing golf with them or you're having dinner with them. It's a certain kind of antisocial personality that's required to do that.
Now that there has been some time and space between you and journalism, you're allowed to comment on the state of journalism today.
I don't think the state of journalism is bad. I think, first of all, I think the Times is in an excellent place. I think there's more. There's something called ProPublica that's doing a lot of good national reporting. There's just been an announcement that there's going to be a new nonprofit called the Marshall Project that's going to do criminal justice reporting that I think will be very good. I would be more worried about sort of local and state level reporting, because the papers, that had a little bit of extra money that they could devote to having, small and but good enough investigative staffs to do real investigative reporting, those have gotten cut to the bone, and I don't know what replaces those.
No, and we've certainly lost that in the television and radio side.
Yes. So that is not good. I mean, ultimately, I don't know who pays. I don't know who pays for an investigation of, the Miami mayor's office, and I don't know if local nonprofits will spring up to try to fill this gap. It is a problem, but I think on the national level, there's still a lot of very, very good reporting going on.
You optimistic that your daughter will read a newspaper?
She'll read. I don't know if she'll read a newspaper.
Well, I know one thing she'll be reading much later. Another one of these, right?
Yes.
There will be another.
There will. Oh, there has to be.
There has to.
Another,
Well,
yes.
now there
Based
has
on-
to be
based
another.
on the ending, there has to be another. Yeah, I don't know when she'll read them. I've thought these books are not that appropriate for, sort of, I think 15, 16.
She's an adult.
They're pretty violent. But a good friend of mine who actually was an editor at the Times, she says her sons read them, and the younger one is 12, and she says, they read what they like, and I guess the world goes on spinning.
I don't know. I've never had a problem with children reading, as long as they read.
Right.
And then you can explain it to them later.
Yes.
This has been such fun for me. I want to thank you
Ann, thank
so
you.
much. WXEL, thanks you so much for leaving that lovely New York
Oh, God,
weather
it was,
and
yes,
being
it's-
brave to come down here
It's
to
really
our...
tough to come down to 75 degrees.
And I will say that you are going to do a book signing tonight.
Tonight, yes.
At Murder on the Beach Bookstore in Delray Beach, 7 o'clock.
Yes.
And for those of you who know Murder on the Beach, it's lovely. And for those of you who have never been, go, because it's just a charming, charming independent bookstore. And we support our bookstores. You have a website as well.
AlexBerenson.com. Yes.
AlexBerenson.com. The book, The Counterfeit Agent, our guest, Alex Berenson. Thank you so much for being here.
It
has
was a
been
pleasure.
delightful.
Thank you.
And a little something for you from
our
our
good
PBS
evening. Now, this
station.
is
There
this
you
is
go.
probably like an Oscar bag. Huh?
That's
It's like,
it. That's it. Okay.
Thank you.
And there's probably a pledge form inside. So, okay. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.